Okay, thank you so much. So I'm going to read our land acknowledgement before we get started with today's presentation. First Nations peoples have lived on this part of Turtle Island for millennia, stewarding the land, the water, and all that contributes to life in this region. Today, the culture and presence of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples enrich the lands and people of this territory. More than 2 centuries ago, the Mississauga people welcomed settlers to this territory, providing sustenance and engaging in trade and commerce. Between 1781 and 1820, 8 treaties were signed between the Crown and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who opened their territory to settlement. Today, York University campuses are located on the Toronto Purchase Treaty Number 13, lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and lands of the Anishinaabeg of the Williams Treaty First Nations. Our campuses are also situated on the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. Treaty history is foundational, and it is our collective responsibility to honor the land as we honor and respect those who have gone before us, those who are here, and those who have yet to come. We are grateful for the opportunity to be learning, working, and thriving on this land, and we commit to learn the truth and be active in the process of reconciliation. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention to our land acknowledgement, and now I will hand it over to Cheryl, our Associate Dean Academic, to get started with our presentation today.
Thank you, Eileen, and welcome everybody. Wow, we are almost hitting 200. This is wonderful. On behalf of the Faculty of Grad Studies, I'd like to welcome you to York and also let you know that today's conversation is just the first, I hope, of many that you're going to have about graduate supervision. It really is the beating heart of graduate studies. I'm here with my colleague Sham Patel, who's a doctoral candidate and also has worked with the Faculty of Grad Studies in mobilizing our individualized development plan, something I hope that everybody will get to know and learn about later. So today I'll share what our agenda will be. I'm going to talk with you about what grad supervision is, talk to you a little bit about supervisory responsibilities and supervision, but really focus in on what is your role in this central component of a graduate degree. And then the best part really is to hear from a graduate student himself about his own reflections on graduate supervision, his own advice to incoming students about how to thrive in this supervisory relationship, this academic relationship. And then there'll be time for questions through the Q&A. So if questions pop up, please use the Q&A function at the bottom. Some of the questions will be answered while I'm speaking. Others will be saved for after Sham and I are done, and Sham and I will answer some of them. So let's go. Graduate supervision, it really is an academic relationship. It is a partnership between an experienced scholar, that's the supervisor, and yourself, an aspiring scholar. It shifts over the years because you change, your needs change, your capacities change, your project evolves. A graduate supervisor has a role to be an academic mentor. Those two words really matter. They're not a friend, they're an academic and they're a mentor. And they provide guidance to you. They encourage your scholarship and research. Yes, they're there to assess how you're doing, give you lots and lots of feedback. Sometimes you're ready for it, sometimes not so much. We also teach students the necessary skills to plan and conduct original research, if that's the case, and to write it up. And we participate in preparing you and your thesis or dissertation to be defended. Graduate supervision is intentional. It's not winging it. It is a relationship. It's interdependent, students, meaning it takes you and takes your supervisor and the committee to really sort of join together around making it work. It's meant to be a space where you grow and we grow, where we're collaborative, and underpinning it all is the notion of mutual respect. Graduate supervision involves teaching strategies that typically occur in meetings through oral discussion and also written feedback on your various works. I often think that I now teach over in the margins on the side of a document a lot of times. And then of course follow up with a meeting and go over the feedback orally. You know, supervision, sometimes students tell us that it feels a bit informal when they compare it to classroom-based learning or something like a webinar. But it actually is very intentional, and it's accomplished through meetings, several meetings, pre-booked meetings, proactive meetings between yourself and your supervisor. It involves attention to open communication, a willingness to learn and unlearn, openness to giving feedback and receiving feedback, and everybody wanting to grow. The grad student has the primary responsibility for getting her done and for being successful and for your own intellectual growth. But you're not alone because the department, the program, the supervisor, the supervisory committee, and the faculty of grad studies all together are expected to foster an environment where you can get her done, and also an environment that supports the dignity and value of the student and the supervisor and supports the student's successful completion. Supervision is central to this. So while your partners, the supervisor's the senior partner, and both members of what we call a dyad have responsibilities and rights. The principles that underscore or guide grad supervision here at York are these on your screen. And we put dignity first because everybody's dignity matters. The person that's teaching you, yourself, the committee, everybody involved. And when we start with dignity at the center, hopefully things go well. Then respect and mutuality, meaning that everybody sort of can benefit a bit from this relationship. Everybody should be growing. And then efficacy. That means that the enactment of best practices to supervise and the enactment of best practices to complete a degree are part of supervision. And then accountability. We all are accountable to one another. So I'm going to speak just briefly about supervisor responsibilities because today we really wanted to talk with you about how you can drive supervision yourself through your list of things that you're responsible for in order to make supervision work well. But I'll start with a few around the supervisor. So a supervisor really is meant to facilitate your intellectual growth and contribution to a field of knowledge. Notice that we say facilitate. Because you have the key role there, and that we meet often with you to discuss and clarify mutually agreed upon sort of goals and expectations. And we're supposed to assist in the development and your execution of a reasonable schedule so you can get the various milestones done. Milestones is just a big grad studies word for the little parts of the project along the way. The first one is forming your supervisory committee, getting a supervisor. That's a milestone, for example. Making sure that we tell you when we're going to be away and making sure that there's coverage for you so that there aren't delays. Mentoring, key role here, mentoring in all phases of your research or creative work, including helping you develop a proposal, overseeing your data collection, your analysis, what literature should you be looking at. We basically have our finger on all parts of your project. That isn't to control it, it's meant to guide it. We should be providing thorough, timely, constructive, and actionable feedback. And a best practice there is to write it first. And then if the student wants, I always ask my students, do you want to meet to go over it verbally? Because reading it, you might maybe make assumptions. Maybe the way we've written the feedback isn't sufficiently clear. So sometimes having an actual conversation super helps. And we should be working with you to provide and support a safe, inclusive academic working environment. We should be talking with you about intellectual property, for example, making sure you're connected to information about, say, funding, and making sure that we're helping you know where the relevant policies are. Your grad program director does a lot of that as well. And later on when you're close to getting her done, and I want you to start envisioning that now, see it, have a vision board inside your head. Then we're sort of wanting to make sure that we're providing you support so that when you're graduating, you can take this degree and move it into maybe a different kind of a career. So if you have your phones handy, those of you that do have a cell phone, I invite you to scan this QR code. These are the Ontario Principles for Graduate Supervision, which York endorsed. And they lay out, and I'd like you to have a copy of this. They lay out the responsibilities of you, your supervisor, committee members, grad program directors, departments, and faculty at grad studies. So I'll give you a second to grab that. And then I hope I'm putting this in the right chat. Let me see. Yeah. I'm also in the chat putting York's responsibilities as well. I know, who likes that word? No one. But it lays it out. And you need to know it. Like, what is my supervisor supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to be doing? So scan that, grab it in the chat, and let's keep going. So let's get on to the real stuff. How can you not only drive your graduate degree, but thrive in a supervisory relationship? So this is what you're supposed to be doing. And why? So that you do well, so that you finish well, so that you thrive in this teaching relationship, which is grad supervision. So the first one is to really know what are the rules and deadlines and guidelines, and set a plan, like in order to reduce student stress, setting a plan ahead of time and knowing how much time do I have, when do I need to get a supervisor, when should I get a proposal done, how do I do ethics, what are all the deadlines. If you know them, you're less stressed about them. You sort of take control of it. Also, students need to know that whatever your project you're going to do has to be within the scope of the program you've been approved for. So make sure you're asking, is this going to work? Maybe you had to propose a project in order to get admitted, but still, maybe you want to change it a little bit. Just make sure you're talking to the grad program director or your seminar teacher, for example, to make sure that the project you want to do is within scope. Then you select a topic of research in collaboration with your supervisor for which adequate resources are available. So sometimes students want to do huge, massive things. It's going to take too long. There's not enough resources available. So we sort of, supervisors sometimes do this hand motion where we sort of say, okay, let's just bring this in just a little bit to make this manageable. A good thing for you to do is to keep a record of your research, anything you're doing, and being fully accountable for demonstrating the authenticity of your work, and that you produce a project, a thesis that is indeed your work. Key word there. Recognize also that the supervisor and supervisory committee have other teaching, research, and service obligations, and also a life. They're asked to do that as well for you. And so I just think a good thing to do is to set up meetings, have them in the calendar, maybe every 3 weeks with your supervisor eventually, and then they're there. So you don't have to sort of scramble when you need to talk. Number 6 is pretty important, and that is to maintain your progress. Keep her moving forward. Any little progress is a win, but making sure that you progress in a way that matches full-time expectations or part-time expectations. Always acting in the spirit of being a colleague with your supervisor. The word is collegiality, professors, departmental administrators, and also your fellow grad students. And when you do get feedback, it's not easy. Sometimes it's really, you're like, yes, I really want this. Other times it's like, oh man, there's so much of it. Give yourself a day, 2 days to sort of let it sink in, and then consider it and then respond to the feedback. Maybe you don't understand some of it. I ask you now, don't forget this, to seek clarification right away rather than let it fester. And to meet and communicate regularly with your supervisor and sometimes with your supervisory committee members. You're going to get a lot of emails. A lot are going to come from FGS. Read them. If you don't have time to read them, then make every Friday you read the FGS emails and emails from your program, because then you know sort of funding opportunities, scholarship opportunities, for example, webinars like you're here today. But also your program might have things you have to do. And if you get them done on time, again, it helps your own well-being. And that's what I care about most. Recognize also that once in a while, some students feel that they need to change supervisors. They've secured a supervisor, but maybe the nature and focus of the research topic has shifted, for example, then it might have an implication on how quickly you complete. So it's not a decision to be taken lightly. It's always a decision to be talked through with your grad program director. I had a student myself who was with another supervisor doing something on X, and he realized that, wow, I really want to do Y, and came to me. And so everybody met, making sure feelings weren't hurt. He completely pivoted. That's not always possible, but in this case, it was possible. If you're going to be away, let your supervisor know, especially if it's for extended periods of absence. Just like stay in the loop with us. Just make sure that we know. And to be present. I say if you have a meeting and let's say you haven't really, say, written 5 pages to share with your supervisor, something like that, I say still meet, touch base. It's always good to check in. Students and supervisors leave those meetings with something new in their mind. And the research shows that the more consistent you meet with your supervisor, the more timely completion of your degree occurs. Some other student responsibilities so that you can get her done and that you have wellness is, where appropriate, advocate for yourself so that you can resolve any issues. So something comes up, come forward, I always say, talk to your supervisor first. If that's not the right person, talk to your seminar teacher, if that's the right person, or your grad program director. Sometimes it's your grad program assistant who really is the heart of your program. And also make sure if you've got some funding outside, just that your supervisor is aware. Self-advocate, open communication is welcome. So let's have a look at this beautiful slide here. It's pretty new for us. We're so happy we've received it. Over to the left are some of the graduate supervisor responsibilities. Let's take a look at those together. So the guidance, being sensitive to the unique needs and strengths of students, being relatively accessible. That means not at night, maybe not on weekends, not on holidays. Responding in a timely manner to submitted work. The rule at York is 15 business days. Unless you've submitted like 200 pages, don't do that. Submit in small pieces. And to work with you to ensure a safe research environment, talk to you about career options, reference letters, stuff like that. Let's look over to the right side of your screen now around the grad student. So, know about the rules and do your best to meet deadlines. I want you to do that for your own well-being, truly. To work with your supervisor to identify anything getting in the way of your success. Make sure we know how you're moving forward. That's called research progress. And giving serious consideration to feedback, keeping your supervisor informed of your progress and how's it going if you're doing research or a creative project. And make sure that we know if there's anything getting in the way of your progress. In the middle are our shared responsibilities, meaning that we both do this. So from the bottom to the top, we both contribute to fostering mutual respect. We both need to be aware of and making sure our students or us use different services and resources at York. We both have to be informed on university and departmental policies and regulations. We both contribute to the creation of your research plan. And boy, do we both have to commit to communicating regularly and discussing roles and responsibilities and expectations. So the best part is where we get to hear from a current graduate student very close to graduating, and that's Sham Patel, Faculty of Education. And welcome, Sham. I'm going to run your slides and you just tell me when you'd like me to move them. So over to you, colleague.
Great. Thank you so much, Cheryl. It's lovely to see you all. I'm a little nervous that there are over 200 incoming students at this session today. I do have a few familiar names on that list. They were students of mine when I was a teaching assistant, so that's always lovely to see. Um, I'll quickly introduce myself and then I'll share a bit about this journey and hopefully some tips that you'll find helpful. So, I'm a PhD candidate. I'm at the end of my journey. I recently submitted a draft of my dissertation. You'll be there. I know it might not seem like it right now, but you'll be there soon enough as well. And my draft is being read by my committee, so I should get some edits in a few weeks from now. I'm actually, speaking of meeting with supervisors and committee members, meeting one of them tomorrow. Um, so this is a part of the process, and I welcome you to York University. Um, so I was thinking what analogy to make of graduate school, and the one that I could think of is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but there's a show called Dancing with the Stars. Basically a competitive reality show where they pair celebrities with professional dancers. And I like to think of graduate school in a similar way, partly because I'm a very pop culture reality TV person, but also because, much like the show, graduate school requires a lot of hard work and dedication. Sometimes it has challenges, and a lot of times there's a lot of wonderful learning opportunities. And just like anything else in life, there's a mixture of the two. When it comes to your supervisor, I don't imagine the two of you will be dancing together, but it's similar in that way where there are these intricate steps that you have to take. And here are some things that I think could be helpful to make that dance a little bit smoother. I've found that establishing some kind of rapport with your supervisor is really important. And I think it was reiterated throughout the presentation that communication and regular communication should be really a part of the process. Something here that I try to be mindful of is that the supervisor is there to support you for sure, and it's a part of their responsibility to do so, but you're also a part of the process. There's a colleague who we often do this together, Jennifer Hodder, who reminds me that it's up to you to steer the journey as well. And what you make of it is how it also unfolds. So you don't want to put all this pressure on your supervisor, but rather see it as a working dynamic that both of you are part of the journey, and you as a student get to lead part of that as well. The other one I found is throughout graduate school, you will be receiving a lot of feedback. And I think sometimes there can be a bit of a jump between, especially if you're going from undergrad to the master's, between the kind of expectations that are there for your research and your writing. And sometimes that can bring forth a range of emotions. I know when I first received feedback on an assignment, I thought I had written something impeccable, but there was a lot of work to do. Um, and you also might feel this need to always prove yourself. You know, in academia, there's this saying that we always have to be right, but that actually isn't the case. So I think when it comes to constructive feedback, thinking it as an opportunity, you are an emerging scholar and writer, and in that process, you're learning, whether it's research in your lab, presenting at a conference, or writing your own individual paper. All that is a part of the process of you becoming an even better researcher than you already happen to be. And then finally, while you develop rapport with your supervisor and take feedback from them, sometimes things don't always go the way that they're meant to be, and conflict arises. This one is interesting because it's really ingrained in my doctoral research, in which I argue that conflict, while making us feel sometimes upset, even feeling shame, is actually quite normative, and that it can be resolved. A lot of times, conflict is really based on miscommunication or misunderstanding. And when you take the steps to resolve that, you'll realize it's not that big of a thing you thought it was initially. It happens. I had a switch in supervisors after my first year. And so I share that in a very vulnerable way because you might also experience the same. On the next slide, for these three things, I'll give some tidbits on how you might navigate them as beginning doctoral students or master students coming into this journey. So, when it comes to communication, something I found helpful both in school and in the workplace is having some kind of initial meeting with your supervisor where you get to know each other. You can introduce yourself, your supervisor can introduce themselves. I found this profoundly helpful in any place I've worked because sometimes there are little tidbits that you get to know that might actually make the journey much smoother. An example I like to give is with my supervisor. One of the things she mentioned is if I ever email her and she forgets to respond, that I should just follow up. And she's given me a time frame of like after a week, if I don't hear back, just to send her another email. Um, I would have never guessed. I'm that student who would just like wait and wait till forever. But knowing these little things on what works for your supervisor, what works for you, it could even be boundaries. Some people don't respond to things on weekends, and that's totally okay. But knowing them might help you feel a little bit more calm in the process. The other part with feedback, I mean, I have so many stories I can share. But what I would say is going back from my, not to age myself, but my younger days when I received feedback initially, I would feel very tense about it. And um, you might have this urge that you need to respond right away, whether it's a paper you've worked on for a course or anything of that sort. But maybe stepping away for a day is the best thing, and taking some time off from that feedback. I've also found it helpful to talk about it with somebody outside of academia. So my sister is one person. I have a friend who I talk about it with, and their perspective often has a calming effect, where you realize the feedback isn't as overwhelming as you initially take it. And then in hindsight, you realize that all the feedback that was given to you was actually there to improve your work and make you a better scholar. And finally, it's not easy to talk about conflict or resolving conflict in such a short amount of time. But I think if I could give advice, because this one was quite personal, where I did have to switch supervisors, um, it is okay to talk about conflict with your supervisor in a professional way. It can actually be very productive. And if you're having those thoughts, I do think springboarding it with somebody outside of the space is helpful. Just walking through what you're thinking, maybe having sort of a script of what you want to say. I said at the beginning that I really loved reality TV. You don't want to be bringing that energy into a professional space like this one. I hope not. So just being cognizant of how you convey your words can be really helpful. The Faculty of Graduate Studies also has a ton of resources. You'll get them throughout the time you're at York University, but there are ones around navigating conflict as well. But most of all, you don't want to bottle it up. There's a professor at the University of Ottawa, Dr. Ruth Kane, who told me something that was quite life-changing, which is if you don't tell us, we'll never really know. So you do want to have these conversations and probe them with your supervisor. With that said, I wish you all the best on this journey, and I look forward to any and all questions that you have.
Thanks, Sham. Just before we get to questions, I know there's several that are waiting for us to answer them in the chat, in the Q&A. We do have some do's and don'ts, and these really were developed with Sham and Jen in the past, and the Graduate Supervision Support Hub. So here's some do's and don'ts. We really do want you to enjoy the journey. Set yourself out to say, I'm going to enjoy this, even the bumps, because it'll show that you have grit. And to be proud of yourself, proud for getting accepted, and proud for journeying through this. Do communicate regularly with your supervisor. Don't avoid, don't ghost or delay communication with your supervisor. Do seek constructive feedback and act on it, but don't rely solely on your supervisor for progress. Rely on yourself, rely on the committee members, rely on peers. Manage your time effectively, seek balance because your wellness matters. And I really want you to hear me say that you want to strive for balance and have a plan for balance. Participate, I'll stick with the do's. Participate in academic and professional development and interact with your fellow grad students, especially when you're done all your courses. Make a point to come on campus. Don't get isolated. Do maintain academic integrity in all your work. Don't cross your fingers and hope. Actually work very proactively to make sure that your academic integrity is pristine. Do respect your supervisor's time and commitments. Be proactive in seeking any supports you need. That's not a weakness. That's a strength to say, I think I need some help with writing or something. And prepare for and have difficult conversations. I hate conflict, so I'm with you if you also do, but having the difficult conversations helps so that things don't fester. So some don'ts. I'll continue on. Don't ignore the feedback. And if you don't get it or you're angry about it, best to ask questions about it. Can you tell me more about this part? Can you explain this a little bit more to me? And I like to do that verbally versus through email, long emails. Try to don't skip opportunities for growth. You can't do them all. I have a student who wants to do every one that comes in her inbox, and then she gets overwhelmed. And so we talk about pacing. Of course, don't engage in plagiarism or data falsification. Have a conversation early with your supervisor about anything and all things related to artificial intelligence. We're not going to talk about that today, but I want you to be sure that you have that conversation with your supervisor. And don't always expect immediate responses. As Sham said, they'll maybe set up, like maybe your supervisor will say a similar thing. If you don't hear back from me in a few days, email me again. Don't wait for your supervisor to provide everything. And as we've talked about, don't avoid or delay talking about stuff. Great. So here's another thing I'd invite you all to scan. Those of you that have a cell phone, this is our Supervision Toolkit. And once I stop sharing and we stop recording, I'll put a few tools into the chat, as will my colleague Eileen. There's all kinds of stuff in there. There's a Student Hub part of the Supervision Toolkit, and in there, there's actually a guide for finding a supervisor. And I know there's lots of questions in the Q&A for me about that. Yeah, so with that, I think we can stop sharing and possibly stop recording and move to questions.